So we'll go ahead and kick this off. And this is our first, what we're calling a leadership lunch and learn series. So what we want to do is every week to have that old brown bag lunch and learn series to where we leaders can get together, talk about a topic and learn what we can, grab a lunch, sit down and just participate in a good self-development, leadership development exercise every week on Thursdays at 12. We're going to bring in a different guest each time, talk about a different topic, and then really try to help leaders learn as much as they can in these windows every week. And today, our first guest, one of them awesome. It's just incredibly exciting to talk to Mark. Mark is the president and founder of J. Allen Leadership Solutions and is an expert in leadership and organizational development with over 25 years of experience as a senior military officer and government executive. As an executive and leadership coach with decades of practical leadership experience, Mark has developed countless leaders and teams to achieve better results. Throughout his professional life, he is qualified to coach at all levels of leaders and has worked with teams ranging in size from 10 to 11,500 members. I know I've worked with Mark in the classroom, in the military, and one of the things that I always love about Mark is that he fully invests into the leaders around them to develop them. So watched it with students, watched it with fellow leaders in the military, just an absolute awesome developer of leaders. And so a fitting topic for today is leadership development. So thanks for joining us today, Mark. Really appreciate you jumping on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Charles.
All right, so just kind of the first question to just get things going. And, I'm very curious. It's one of the things I just love to learn from people that have done it. And I'm just curious how you develop leaders. So what's the why behind why you develop leaders so much?
Great question, Charles. I'll preface this whole discussion today with a disclaimer. Whenever you hear a really cool sounding bio and you hear the word expert, don't let that lead you to believe that, boy, Mark's got all the answers, because if I know one thing, it's that I don't have all the answers. So what I'll espouse today is my beliefs that are hopefully rooted in some fact and some research and some experiences that have reinforced those beliefs. So if there's some questions that come later, don't be surprised if I say, well, what do you think? Because I'm a continuous learner and I don't claim to say that I've got all the answers. That being said, Charles, to answer your question, I thought why was a great word to use. Why we develop leaders is about the why. It's about purpose. It's about vision. It's about where the organization is headed, and it's about why the organization exists. A great book, Simon Sinek. Everybody knows the Simon Sinek book by this point, but really we have to develop leaders in the organization because they're the linchpin. They're the connection between the people, because it's always about people, and the why and the purpose. Leaders help, leadership and management. I've taught a couple organizational leadership classes over the past few years, and it's amazing the conversations we have and the distinctions that aren't quite understood at first about the difference between leaders and managers. And we won't have that class today, but leaders are really about charting the direction, charting the vision. Leaders are understanding the purpose of the organization, looking forward, and then kind of articulating that to the workforce, to the team, because it provides that motivation, that understanding, that why are we here every day working to the team. So great question is why, but it all starts with people and it all starts with leaders, and they're just the linchpin of the organization and helping it accomplish its purpose.
Focusing on the organizations is really awesome. And how do you, I guess, curious, how do you get the culture of the organization to embrace that? So knowing the why, the way you described it, how do you build that organizational culture that goes into that?
So I think it starts with trust. I think there are a million books on culture, and what it really boils down to is how do leaders establish the way we're going to do things around here. I think the how comes down to three things. It comes down to purpose, clarity, and psychological safety. And what do I mean by that? Purpose is kind of a little bit what I talked about just a minute ago about the why. And it's not only understanding the organization's why, why does the organization exist? Why are we here? Who are we serving? But it's helping others then to understand their purpose in the organization and what they contribute. And that flows into the clarity piece. The clarity is really, does everybody understand what their role is, what the role is of the people around them, who they can go to when they need to get something done? What are the expectations? Expectations is a big one. Do they understand what's expected of them? And is that clear? I had a mentor very early on in my military career that talked about the 5 R's. Clarity is about rules, roles, relationships, responsibilities, and results. And when there's clarity and purpose, you've got a great combination. And it really then is incumbent upon the leader to establish psychological safety. Psychological safety is, I don't want to call it a new term, but it's become almost a buzzword these days. Dr. Amy Edmondson out of Harvard is one of the leading proponents. There are a few, but if you boil it down into, I'm a new leader, and what in the world does this guy mean by psychological safety? It's like, hey, does everybody in your organization feel comfortable just kind of asking questions and speaking their mind? And we could have a, probably an undergraduate class on how you establish psychological safety, but the what is, you've got to make sure as the leader, you're setting the tone, setting the example where people feel like they can speak their mind, and it's not going to be a messenger kind of moment. Something that's controversial, or if they disagree with the boss.
So how does a leader create that safety?
By enacting the things I just talked about. I think it comes back to that trust piece, and you establish that safety by establishing trust, and you establish trust by investing in it. Leaders, Charles, you know this, we talked about this in class. Posner and Kuzes and the Leadership Challenge talk about investing in trust and talking about how leaders need to trust first. And what's that mean? That means, if I can demonstrate first, Charles, you're one of my new teammates, if I can demonstrate first that I'm going to trust you, and that I display that opens the door for you then to trust me in return. And that psychological safety starts with the trust. And you do that by letting your folks know where you stand on things. I think a great way to do that is to talk about your values, talk about them openly, share them with your team, and then espouse them. Like, you got to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And when you know that you've got your values solid and you've imparted them on your folks, and you're trusting them, that opens that door to trust. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'll pause there for any other questions you might have.
I like it, and creating that safety, building the trust, all of that. It's just incredibly difficult to build leaders if that trust doesn't exist. And the leader is only going to allow you to take them as far as they trust you. And so if that trust isn't there, then the conditions aren't going to be right for the leadership development to happen.
Yeah.
Or it might be one of those situations to where we learn what not to do, which isn't a good place to be in.
And we overcomplicate it too. If I'm a new leader, if you're a new leader, what I'd like you to know is just care about your people, care about your teammates, and show it. And don't make it a whole lot harder than that at first, because we're intuitive as humans, and we know when somebody's genuine and when somebody's not so genuine. Just show concern and share information. Why use information and knowledge as power? You can establish that psychological safety by letting folks know what you know as best as you can and sharing it with them. And that just builds that trust.
And showing concern, that's absolutely critical. And what I'd like to help is that leader that, gets is like, yeah, I've got to show concern, but what exactly does showing concern look like? What are some specific things that have to be done to show that? So could you have any tactics or techniques for showing concern?
Yeah, I just get to know people. I mean, I hate to overcomplicate it, but Bernard Bass developed a theory of transformational leadership, and I won't go into all of it, but one of the things he talked about was one of the 4 factors of transformational leadership. Just being a great leader is individual consideration or individualized consideration. And what did he mean by that? It just means treating people with compassion. It just means showing them that you care. It just means listening to them. It really means not waiting until your annual review to understand what what their goals and aspirations are. And it gets back to that first question you asked me about why are leaders important in an organization? How can I tie every single person's own motivations and interests and passions and desires to what we need to achieve in the organization? I can't do that unless I show that concern and that understanding of what makes that person tick. There's ways we can do it. In my coaching work, we just use some visioning exercise, some values exploration exercises, even some assessments might show those things. But really, why wait to an annual review? Hey, Charles, welcome to the team. Talk about tell me about you and what are you doing here and what are your aspirations? And then after I learned that, when you're asking what I can do, what can I do consistently over time to show that I actually appreciate what your goals are and do my best to help you further you in your journey while I'm looking out for the organization at the same time.
Yeah, and two things I really heard out of that is that first off is listening is an underutilized leadership skill that people you can't listen too much as a leader. What you do with what you hear is different, but listening is so critical. And then asking questions. So I think a lot of new leaders fall into the trap of feeling like they have to direct and tell to establish that authority. But going back to listening, if you can listen and actually get those insights, then critical things for leaders to pick up on. So yeah. Is that a pretty good summary there, is to listen and ask questions to help show that concern?
It's a perfect summary. And it kind of gets into coaching as a leadership style. And it's not a leadership style that we've explored a lot in academia. We've not fostered a lot in organizations, but it's there. Directive or commanding leadership is good at certain times. It's good in crisis. It's good when things have to happen and there's, the leader has to say, we've got to get this done. We've got to get it done now. If you operate like that over time, I think you're going to find that you're going to lose that respect and understanding of your folks. Listening to them, and this is hard for me because as Dan, Kim know, and Charles, I'm a talkative guy, but when can you just sit there and listen to what's going on, ask questions, and don't just ask questions, but ask open-ended questions. Michael Bungay Stanier wrote a book called The Coaching Habit, and he wrote that book for leaders, just for everyday leaders. Not to become coaches, not to become executive coaches, but to just approach working with their folks in more of a collaborative style and ask open-ended questions that allows that freedom of thought and that freedom of exploration in the person whom you asked, and allows them to speak their mind about what they think. And if there's one theme today, Charles, it's like, don't overcomplicate leadership. I'm a simple kind of guy, and I can't memorize a lot, and I don't know a lot about theory, but if I can just remember to just ask what's on your mind, or what do you think about that? Or can you tell me more about that? And avoid why questions. If I ask you, Charles, what was the thought process that you arrived at for choosing the format of your lunch and learn today, versus asking you, hey, Charles, why are you running your lunch and learning the way you are today? Listen to the way those two questions landed with you. And the why question kind of puts the person automatically on the defensive. Like, well, if he's asking me why I did it this way, that must imply that he doesn't approve, versus a what led you to do this? What was your thought process behind it? That allows you to explain yourself and arrive there. So listening and asking open-ended questions. I'll stop talking and start listening.
Two awesome things I did, really picked up on is that, you hit that question, what do you think? And that is such a powerful question. And that's something that every new leader should put in their toolkit is when you don't know, just ask that question, what do you think? And if you can genuinely ask that question and listen, powerful way to build the trust and get others involved. So what do you think is a great question for every leader to have right there, ready to ask at a moment's notice. And then another thing that I wanted to kind of circle back to, you mentioned performance reviews, and it's worth bringing back into this, that performance reviews aren't necessarily leadership development. The way you were describing it is all the time in preparation for that annual review, when you execute the end of the process. And so there's a lot of development that should be occurring prior to that before you do a review of what happened. And I think that's something that's missing on a lot of people. So um, could you give just circle back around and give a tip to a new leader that has to do the first performance reviews of their career?
Yeah, I don't want to sound disheartening, but if you're a new leader and it's time for your first performance review, um, know that the Gallup organization found something about annual performance reviews. They found that they just don't work very well. People don't really get much out of them. And I hate to break that to you if you're a new leader. So then the question becomes, so what? What do I do with that? Charles, you hit the nail on the head. It's everything that happens from the start point of the initial, meeting with the new employee or start point of a new performance period, whatever it is. And it gets back to what we talked about earlier. What did you do to shape for the year? Let's say a year. It's a yearly review. What did you do to shape the outcome of that review so that there's no surprises when you finally sit down with the person? How do you do that? First, it gets back to all the stuff I talked about earlier, really getting to know people, getting to understand where their passions are, where their motivations are, making sure they have clarity about what their roles are, and more than anything, clarity about what you expect from them. That should be established very early on. And through that listening and through those coaching conversations and other leadership styles, we just keep those conversations going all the way along. So that the annual performance review should never be a surprise. And what I would challenge you to do is, if it's time for your annual performance review, the prep work might have, could have, would have, should have been about feed forward. What are the strengths that person possesses, and how can they leverage their strengths to develop what you expect? And then, so when you sit down and have an annual performance review, how do you make it a positive event, even if there's needs improvements? Well, I tell you, and I say we in the military, Dan, if you had your camera on, you were nodding your head, you nod your head. We look at a performance review or a 360 assessment, and we go right to, did I get the high marks, or did I get told I did something wrong? My advice to a new leader is, if it's time to sit down with that annual performance review, talk about these are the great contributions that I saw. Here were the expectations. And if you didn't meet it, make it a learning event. Start asking those open-ended questions about what happened. Tell me how it went. Tell me what you would do differently as we move forward, and make it a learning event versus an evaluation. Everybody wants to grow and learn. And I know you asked me what the tips were for performance evaluation, but Charles, it really just is everything leading up to it. That's just like the end point. And one of the things we haven't talked about yet is encouraging failure. How many bosses set the tone where they encourage failure on their teams? And they do it in a way that allows growth and learning. You and I we have both worked in environments where, we use the terms, must happen, or zero defect, or, cannot fail, must happen. And certainly in the military, in service organizations, there are things that can't fail. I mean, when people's lives are on the line. But generally those times are less frequent. What can you do in all the times when it's not life or death, make or break, to prepare folks to deliver in that moment by letting them mess it up?
Yeah.
I started this conversation with, I don't know everything. I'll tell you what, all the stories that come out today will probably be because of something I screwed up. And now that I've, moved out of organizational leadership, my mission in life is to just help people understand what I didn't know, and screwed up. So allow failure.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a great segue. So you've started J. Allen. Can you tell us about what you're doing with J. Allen?
Sure. And it gets to my why. Years of organizational leadership experience and years of getting bloody lips and black eyes, and hopefully learning some things along the way. And quite frankly, what I just said, wishing I'd learned the real secrets to authentic leadership a lot earlier on my journey. And now having a point in my life where I can step out of organizational leadership and help others quite frankly, Charles, learn the things I wish I would have, could have, should have learned earlier. And that's what we're doing. And it goes back to my why and my beliefs, and that's that leaders are made, not born. And whether you're an accidental leader, in other words, you were a great, I don't know, software developer, and now you're in a management role because you were a great software developer and you don't have a lick of training or development in leadership, you've got it. And that's what we do. We help people align themselves. You can't lead others until you know yourself. And we help people discover, really who they want to be, what their underlying purpose and motivations and dreams are about. And then we help them assess where they are today. And that's when we're able to start taking a look at, okay, what's going really well and what do we want to capitalize on? Or where are there some gaps and seams on who you really want to be and where you are, and helping you get there. And from an organizational standpoint, when people are aligned with their purpose and their mission and their values, and when they're able to articulate that into their jobs every day, your employee engagement is going to go through the roof. It's going to be much higher because that's tied my why, my purpose, to the organization's purpose. So that's what we do. We help individuals, and I love nothing more than that. But we also build teams and help organizations by just bringing their teammates in and understanding those things. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, agree. We love the mission because it's similar to what we do, and I think that there's there's so much need for leadership development that the more we can work together and really promote the development of leaders, we just can't get too much of it. And I was having a conversation with somebody else this morning, and the way they summarize it, that a leader has two main priorities. One's to build a culture, and the second is talent management. And hearing this leader talk about it, I was kind of intrigued because they're pretty successful. And hearing them, neither one of them looked externally. The two priorities of a leader were to look on the inside, to develop the culture and manage the talent. That was the two main priorities. It wasn't have a great strategy or outcompete, know the market better, take care of customers. It was take care of the things inside the most. And that's kind of the thing that I really hung on to out of that conversation is, wow, that I actually asked him, it's like, so when do you turn your focus outwardly? He's like, well, it doesn't matter. If you don't have the culture right and the people right, your best strategy won't matter. It comes naturally when you get the culture and the talent right.
Yeah. And to your point, nail on the head, I'd love to talk to that leader you spoke with, because if your organization's why, if its purpose is crystal clear, mm-hmm. you can afford to, you need to look internally. And if you've got alignment in the whys, I call it, alignment in the whys, that'll eat strategy for lunch. I'm not saying you don't need to be visioning and strategizing for the future, but it's called blocking and tackling. And I appreciate that leader's thoughts.
One of the other things that I know that you've brought into the class and really talked to people about, and you're getting certified in, or maybe you've already got certified in it by this point, but the coaching aspect of it. I know this is one of your strengths. So kind of looking at it in a different lens, what's some techniques or what's some things that a new leader needs to know about coaching to help them be successful?
We hit on it a little bit. We talked about it. It's at every opportune moment. So let me back up and phrase your question with really a quick thought about leadership styles. One of the firm beliefs I have is that leaders need to develop competency in at least 2 or 3 different leadership styles and be able to use them interchangeably. Daniel Goleman, author of Emotional Intelligence, Primal Leadership, really opened the door to some of these kind of leading by coaching or coaches as leaders conversations when he wrote an article for Harvard Business Review called Leadership That Gets Results. And he outlined 6 leadership styles. And we've talked about them a little bit already. Directive or commanding, kind of like what people think the military is. I just tell you what to do, you just do it. Pace setting, like we've got it, let's go. Follow me, this is the way we're going to do it. we got to get there. I'm going to answer your question, but I think it helps to frame this in a leadership style discussion, because there's never just one style that works the best, but I'll get to the coaching. So commanding, pace setting, visionary, am I a visionary leader? Do I, all that why connection, democratic, what do you think kind of questions, almost a consensus building kind of leader, affiliative, in other words, arm around you. We're all family, we're all a team, and then coaching. And what really has become critical in my leadership experiences is being able to know the situation and toggle between those styles when the moment is right. Certainly when it's a crisis situation and the city of Toledo is out of water and you had to get 200,000 people water yesterday, that's probably not the time for arm around the shoulder and democratic vote taking. It's time for let's go, we got to do this. But again, that's for the short term. In the long term, judge the situation. And when you're just developing leaders, Charles, when you're able to invest the time and the patience and the value that it brings to folks, just sit down and have these coaching conversations. And it starts with listening. We're rehashing it. It really starts with listening. Like, what's going on? I mean, it could start with just like, how's your day going, or what's going on? And then don't say anything. Yeah. And let the person talk and ask those open-ended questions and be curious. I would say curiosity is hard for leaders. And I think it's a Michael Bungay Stanier quote that I'm stealing, but he talked about laziness, leaders being lazy. The lazy way to lead is to just tell you what to do. Just go do this. Just go do that. And that's being lazy. The investment comes in, let me ask you some questions and let me be curious about it. Instead of imagining I already know the answer to the question, because we all do it, instead of probing because you're convinced something's wrong, just be curious. What is it that you're doing? What is it that's important to you about why you're doing that? What do you think that the outcome ought to be? What would you do differently if you were able to? When you ask questions like that at the individual level, that's a great coaching technique, a coaching leadership technique. And I would tell you at the organizational level, it works the same way. A couple authors from Purdue wrote a book called Strategic Doing about agile leadership. And they didn't really spell it out like I'm spelling it out, but what they espouse is asking a lot of open-ended questions at the organizational perspective. What might we accomplish instead of what do we need to do? Just words, just plays on words like might and what will we do? What can we do? What should we do? It allows, psychologically, it allows the mind to be in exploring things that we might not have seen before. So that's where coaching comes in. What I do as part of J. Allen Leadership is very deliberate executive coaching, leadership coaching, based on some of the individual needs and desires of the people and organizations I'm coaching for. But you don't have to be an ICF, credentialed coach to be a leader who asks coaching questions.
Good, thanks. And speaking of questions, I think HG has some questions from the audience that we'll bring her in to ask them now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we just had some questions sent in via email and on social media. And I know that you talked to some of the leadership lessons that you've learned earlier on in your career. So I was just wondering if there's a specific one you'd like to talk to more.
That's a great question. Let me ponder that, because the quick answer is you bet I do, but let me think about how it might be most valuable for your listeners today. I would say one of the biggest two lessons, leaders are made, not born. And it's really about authentic leadership. And I touched on that earlier. It's okay. If you're new at this leadership thing, it's okay. You don't have to be, an Army Ranger like Charles is, or a retired military person, or this or that. Hey, Bill George at Harvard he just analyzed thousands of pages of studies. And what he found is, guess what? There's no really definable characteristic that says you're going to be a good leader. What he found was leaders, it's all about our life stories. It's all about who we really are. It's all about being values-centered, connecting with people, being passionate, being consistent in our behaviors, really knowing who we are. And so I would want your listeners out there, if they're new leaders, don't worry, you got this. With just a little bit of investment, you will grow and continue to grow as a leader on your journey. So I would want everybody to know that. It really comes down to knowing yourself. And I think one of the bigger lessons it took me a while to learn is, and it sounds kind of commonsensical, and you'd be like, no, dummy, you don't have to know everything. Being a leader doesn't mean you have to know everything. And I'll tell you, I was at a pretty senior level position, and I let it kind of get to me that I took a senior level position. I forgot that. And I forgot that I didn't have to know everything. And then I had a great team that was working around me that probably knew the answers, and all I had to do was ask the questions and set the priorities. So when it comes to, authentic leadership, leaders are made, not born. And it's okay to not know everything. That's the first one. The second lesson I think that I would reflect on and share is keep it as simple as you can. Keep leadership as simple as you can. There's a lot of complexity to it, and we could talk, and I'm not saying don't ever dive deep and look at the intricacies of leadership, but start simple. And that's at the individual level and at the organizational level. I'd keep your leadership philosophy simple and let it ebb and flow over time. And my first question would be, if you're a new leader, do you have a leadership philosophy yet? And if you don't, what are you going to do to explore and develop that? Quick story, when we were in the military, everybody, when you got a command position, you had to have a leadership philosophy. I don't know, it's just something we just did. And I would tell you, very early in my career, we wrote pages long leadership philosophies, like 3-4 pages long. And I'll tell you what I learned. I started walking around quizzing the folks that were on my team about my leadership philosophy. What do you think they remembered out of that 3 or 4 or 5 pages, or how many of them do you think even read it? So I learned to simplify my leadership philosophy. And what I ended up doing late at the tail end of my military career is just making it a values-centered discussion. And I made it corny. It was my 3 Ds. It was, I boiled my leadership philosophy down to do the right thing. Do the right thing, whether anybody's watching or not. And that got to my value of integrity, and it was dare to make a difference. And that got to my values of commitment. And if you're going to do something, go all the way and do it all the way. And the other one was do unto others. And that got down to my core values of dignity and respect. You might have to earn my respect, but you don't have to earn my dignity. And so I expect everybody to treat others with dignity and with respect at a certain, but the 3 Ds, that was my leadership philosophy. So keep that simple. I would say keep organizational leadership simple. We use something called the Malcolm Baldrige process in the Ohio National Guard, and we spent years at it, and we wrote voluminous documents on it. But if you're in a new organization or on a new team, you can start out by asking some simple questions that are proven to generate results when you get after the answers. How do we lead? That's the first question. How do we lead? How do we plan? And at the organizational level, how do we strategically plan? How do we listen to our customers? How do we get feedback from our customers? How do we manage knowledge? How do we manage our human capital? How do we manage our people? I'm not talking about leadership. I'm talking about human capital management. How do we manage our workforce? How do we define, develop, and improve our processes and our systems? And then what are the results that we expect out of doing all that? You notice those are all how questions. More than once, I've walked into a new organization and I just asked that first question. Okay, first step. Where does your strategic planning process start? So keep that simple. Keep your strategic plans simple as an organizational leader. We had a 1-page strategic plan at the Ohio Department of Veteran Services. I'm not going to tell you it was perfect, but we had 1,000 employees. We operated the largest nursing home in the state of Ohio, and we were the governor's advocate for Ohio's 800,000 veterans and their families. And our strategic plan was on 1 page. That didn't mean there was not a whole bunch of other stuff going on behind the scenes, but it was a 1-pager that could hang on a wall that everybody saw and everybody could align to. And one of them was, we want to be a 5-star nursing home because we were rated by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Standards. You talk about something that everybody rallies around. Everybody's going to rally around. We're going to be a 5-star nursing home. And they knew that was the goal because it was there on the wall. So I guess long answer to a very short question, HG, it was a great question. The other leadership tidbit I have is you'll have time to get complicated. Start out by keeping it simple.
Yeah, I think that Mark, to hit one thing on that, the leadership philosophies, that it's always one of my favorite assignments in the classroom, to make them think about, students make them think how they're going to lead. And then the most memorable one I ever read was actually titled "Surviving Eagle 6," and the title really caught your attention, and it was just 10 bullet points on things that leader expected. Simple, took up about a half a sheet of paper. It very memorable, but it laid out expectations and did a great job of communicating what those expectations are, created that clarity, created that purpose. It was probably one of the most effective ones, and it always grabbed your attention with the surviving part. But it was actually all because he cared enough about his leaders that he wanted them to be successful, and it all tied together.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Great. Well, I think we have time for one more question here, Mark. You spoke to feedback a little bit earlier on. Can you expand on that, specifically when you are facing a leader that you might have to give bad feedback to, or you have to give them, criticism about what they've been doing, their leadership style?
I would start with making sure I was being value centered in a crucial conversation, and thinking before I ever had the conversation and almost planning it out. And I've had many of these throughout my professional life. Back to those values that I talked about that are mine, that are, how can I maintain an environment of dignity and respect as I share some tough information. I wrote a blog piece recently. I still get to write for Fisher Leadership Initiatives Lead Read Today, and it's something that keeps me kind of thinking, and I like doing that. And I wrote a piece recently about the need to be kind and to exercise compassion in our leadership. And it was funny because nobody posted it, but off to the side, I got some backlash, especially from some former military, like, "Hey, Mark, that doesn't sound like the Mark I knew. It's not very tough, And I put a clarifier out there on LinkedIn. Being compassionate does not mean avoiding the issue or sidestepping what needs to happen. It just means, and it was a play on an HBR article, I can't remember the author, about being wise about how you exercise compassion and helping people understand that their personal challenges tie directly into the organization's results. And as a leader, you're responsible for them, but you're also responsible for the organization. And if you can tie it back to the purpose that we talked about and the expectations that we talked about, and just have a very mature professional conversation about, these were the expectations, these are, this was the purpose for what you are or are not to do, and these are the results, and this is how it's impacting the team. You just start there. I'm not going to tell you there's a solid answer for every feedback point, but what can you do to make it a learning experience? Unless this person's done something egregious, I always ask myself, did this person show up today to screw up? And the answer is rhetorically no. Most people don't show up every day to screw something up on the job, or they don't show up every day to exhibit a behavior that is detrimental to the team. So how can we get after that from basically just a fact-based, non-judgmental, curious perspective, and first hope to help? Now, the rest of the story is that goes so far, and as leaders, we might have to make tough calls, and that happens. But I'll tell you, even in the times in my professional life when I've had to let somebody know that they weren't going to be on the team anymore, I held true to those values, and I made sure I gave them feedback and explained why and what we'd done to try to rectify it. And I stayed true to my values of dignity and respect, and didn't quite frankly humiliate the person on the way out the door. So I guess my theme today is keep it simple. Be value-centered, be people-centered, be compassionate, be non-judgmental, but take care of business. And that feedback will probably be a lot more productive for both of you. And oh, by the way, make it feed forward. Different lesson.
Thanks, Mark. Great conversation about developing leaders. We were all over the place, and I think all of it was definitely things that leaders could take and put into place to help them be a better leader. And it is one of the things you open with is humility. We're never there. So as leaders, there's always room for improvement. We can always be improving. That's one of the things I love the most about leadership is there's always something that you could be doing better. So you never have to be bored. Always self-development there. And so how can people get in contact with you if they want to learn more about what you were talking about?
Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. 2 or 3 of you on here that at least on the Zoom session know how to get a hold of me. You can go to my website, www.jallenleadership.com. And if you're wondering why Mark Cappone has a company named J. Allen Leadership, it's a solopreneur website, but I put some thought into it. Go read in the about section why J. Allen Leadership and understand how I get at my purpose and what's important to me. But there's contact information on the website. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Charles, if your listeners get back with you and HG and want to reach out to me, please connect. But I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks again, Mark. And in classic fashion, we got to have a great Zoom conversation. We dog barking in the background, so my dog was definitely listening in and contributing to the conversation. Some mute problems, so we are par for the course for the typical Zoom meeting, and can check all those blocks.
It's life during COVID, Charles. That's just the way it is anymore.
Yeah, that's. Joking around about that what a year ago that would have been a horrible morbid situation to have a dog bark in the background. Now everybody just kind of keeps rolling and we're all used to it. So it's amazing how things have changed in the dynamics of online meetings now. So again, this is a lunch and learn. We're going to do this every Thursday at 12. So we'd invite people to come back next week. The topic for next week is going to be on reflection. Just getting to the end of 2020. This is one time that I think everybody is glad to actually do some reflection, and hopefully that the turn to 2021 will be about that hope and opportunity and some bright future things in front of us. But we do want to take a couple, 45 minutes and discuss the significance of reflection, how to do it, and why it's so important for leaders. And if you're looking for other leadership tools to help your development, you can go to our website, eliteleaderalliance.com. It's out there. HG shared it in the chat, so you can go there and get some great tools, some videos, and even Mark's contributed some great content out there to help leaders develop. So that's what we're all about, is helping leaders get better.